Welcome to the Automaticist. Hello and welcome to another video. So today is the 4th of July 2021, and if you're watching this on the day that I am recording this and the day that it has been uploaded, it is Independence Day in the United States. If you're watching from anywhere else, now you know. And essentially the question that I'm asking is, should we celebrate independence on the 4th of July? I was going to say Independence Day, but I have this situation right here where there's not exactly enough room and I would need like another line and it's just a mess. So I'm not doing that. So, should we? Now there's two parts to this question. Should we celebrate independence on the 4th of July? And should we celebrate independence on the 4th of July? Those are two different questions, and we'll be answering both. First of all, why the 4th of July? Why is it significant? A lot of people think that it's when the Declaration of Independence was signed. This is not true. Information and people moved very slowly in 1776. It took some of the signers until August 2nd to get to Philadelphia to sign the document. Is it when independence went into effect? No, that happened 2 days earlier when the Resolution of Independence was passed in the Continental Congress. Because that's how things work. Is it when the Declaration of Independence was adopted as law? No, see above. It was not really adopted as law, seeing as they were still at war, and at that point, the war could have very easily gone in favor of the British. It was not a foregone conclusion. And so that is one other factor that we need to think about, is that when the Declaration of Independence was drafted and went into effect, that was only if you were a patriot. If you were a loyalist, you didn't care about the Declaration of Independence. You were fighting for the other side. And there were plenty of ordinary people on both sides. So, just because they were living in the place that declared independence didn't mean that they supported it. Didn't mean that they supported the rebellion at all. So it's actually none of these. What actually happened is it's a very legal, technical thing, actually. It's that the final draft of the Declaration of Independence was approved by the Continental Congress, which wrote it. So basically, they turned in their final paper to themselves and gave themselves a passing grade. That's basically what happened, right? Another reason that we might want to question the fact that we're celebrating independence and freedom and liberty and whatever else is that it isn't really freedom for all. We have Juneteenth to celebrate the end of slavery, which of course did not happen for a very long time. Right? 1865, that is quite a bit after the Revolutionary War. I like to think of both of them as a long time ago because neither one of them had World War I levels of technology, although the Civil War was much closer. They did have Gatling guns in the Civil War. They did not have any sort of automatic fire weapons in the Revolution. Native Americans continue to be in a severely disadvantaged circumstance. In general, it was also a complicated position because there were some tribes that were allies of the British, some tribes were allies of the Patriots, and everywhere in between, some did not know or care. And of course, women's rights, still severely lacking at the time of the Revolution, continue to be not entirely equal to this very day. So there's still a lot of work to do regarding all of these categories. So we still have to fight for true freedom and equality for all. And of course, freedom of religion was essentially limited to just Christians. So that might not even be Catholics, because Catholics really had to fight for a long time in order to be treated as equals compared to their Protestant equals. Even when John F. Kennedy became first Catholic president, 1960, it took until then. That's a long time, considering how popular Catholicism is. So it wasn't really freedom for all. So the other thing that we need to think about is what might be a good alternative Independence Day. Well, we want to celebrate our independence, and we did so in a violent revolution. We can't ignore that fact, that it was a war, not a legal transition of power. Right? Our elections are legal transitions of power. This was an illegal transition of power, but we made it legal because we called it a war. So we like to call it the War of Independence. We like to call it the American Revolution. But it was very different from a lot of other revolutions because we weren't the country hosting the regime that was no longer in power by the end. We wanted to represent real change. So there's a lot of surface level legal things that changed, but essentially all that changed is the technical status of a place according to some of the people in the place in the case of the revolution, before the war had concluded, right? Just like the Declaration of Independence itself, that was only valid in the eyes of people who supported the revolution because of independence by that point in time, which is very far from everybody. And essentially nothing really changed because a group of people which had already been meeting decided that they happened to be the government in the eyes of themselves. So let's celebrate the end of the war, because that is the point where we really became a country. Because if you think about it, if we had gone on to lose the war from any point, if the rebellion had been put down early, let's say, we wouldn't be the United States today. Might be slightly different. Maybe there would be something different later, but things wouldn't be obviously exactly the same. So that brings us to the question of, when does war end? Because there's a lot of ways to think about this. Obviously it's sometime in the 1780s. The war was still very much going on in 1781, and the war was very much done in 1785. Well, there's two kinds of end. There's the official end and the practical end. Now, the official end is messy because which official end? So, there's the surrender by the British. There's the terms of surrender being accepted. There's the signing of the peace treaty, which didn't happen until 1783. There's recognition as a country by which other country. Morocco was very early to recognize us as a country, and obviously the British Empire was very late, not doing so until the peace treaty in 1783. And they were essentially forced to because they lost the war. So this is definitely complicated, and so for that reason, I'm going to go with the practical end of the war. when did the fighting stop? That's when the war ended, right? According to me. And I say that it is October 16th, 1781. That is when we should be celebrating independence, on October 16th, if we want to at all. Because the Battle of Yorktown was the last battle of the Revolution, right? 16th of October, 1781, the Battle of Yorktown ended. Why didn't they surrender? Because they were exhausted. It was the end of the day when they realized that they would not be able to cross the river into safety. They were trapped by the Continental Army. There was basically nothing they could do. So they basically went to sleep, woke up, surrendered. That was the end of the fighting. So, of course, there was a storm. That's why they couldn't get across the river to escape. And so that was basically the only choice they had at that point. It was the end of the battle that ended the war, with the winner of that battle winning the war. It's the end as far as I'm concerned, right? That's the only end to the fighting. As we just talked about, there's a lot of dates that could be considered the official end of the war, like legally speaking. I guess technically the only one was the Treaty of Paris, 1783, but that could still be disputed because they hadn't been fighting for quite some time by that point. So that is essentially my thoughts on why we should be celebrating Independence Day on October 16th instead of July 4th, if we want to celebrate it at all. So it's still, of course, an open question. I want you to think, and I want you to think about this. Should we celebrate independence? And if we do, should we celebrate it on the 4th of July? Or the 2nd of July? Or, as I prefer, the 16th of October. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.